Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Mind. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes to fall asleep thinking about hidden underwater worlds instead of counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. You don't need to do anything now but rest. Let your breathing slow, your thoughts soften, and your body grow light, as if you're floating gently beneath warm, sunlit waves. Because tonight, we're drifting down into one of Earth's most vibrant and mysterious places, the coral reef. These underwater cities built by tiny creatures over thousands of years are home to a quarter of all ocean life. They pulse with color, hum with movement, and hide secrets in every crevice. From glowing corals and shape-shifting fish to ancient symbiotic partnerships and reefs that sing in the dark, every corner of the reef holds something beautiful, strange, and deeply calming. We'll go slowly, gently, one sleepy fact at a time. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you. Other discoveries might simply float by like bubbles rising toward the surface, soft, curious, and quietly unforgettable. Now, let's begin. Coral reefs are built by tiny animals, not plants. Though they may look like colorful rocks or underwater gardens, coral reefs are actually built by millions of tiny animals called polyps. Each polyp is a soft-bodied creature no bigger than a pinhead, related to jellyfish and sea anemones. These polyps secrete calcium carbonate, forming hard skeletons that stack upon one another over centuries. Generation after generation, they build upward and outward, creating the massive reef structures we see today. What appears solid and still is actually alive, breathing, and growing quietly in the ocean's embrace. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor. Despite their small footprint, coral reefs are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. They occupy less than 1% of the ocean's surface, yet they support nearly a quarter of all marine species. Fish, crustaceans, mollusks, sponges, and countless microscopic organisms call the reef home. It's a densely packed city of life, where every crack and shadow offers shelter. In this tiny fraction of ocean space, an entire world thrives, layered, interconnected, and humming with quiet energy. The Great Barrier Reef is visible from space. Stretching over 2,300 kilometers along the coast of Australia, the Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on the planet. It's so vast that astronauts can see it from orbit, a pale blue-green ribbon winding through the coral sea. Composed of nearly 3,000 individual reefs and over 900 islands, it's a testament to the power of tiny creatures working together across millennia. From above, it looks serene and timeless. Up close, it pulses with life, color, and constant motion. Corals are both animal and plant in partnership. Coral polyps survive through one of nature's most elegant partnerships. Living within their tissues are tiny algae called zooxanthellae. These microscopic plants use sunlight to produce sugars through photosynthesis, and they share much of that energy with their coral hosts. In return, the coral provides the algae with shelter and access to sunlight. This relationship is so vital that without it, most corals would starve. Together, animal and plant become one, a fusion of two kingdoms thriving as a single organism. Coral reefs grow very slowly. Patience is written into every layer of a coral reef. Depending on the species and environmental conditions, corals may grow just a few millimeters to a few centimeters per year. Some massive coral colonies are hundreds, even thousands of years old. The reef you swim above today may have begun forming before written history. Each layer a quiet record of time, storms, seasons, and survival. Growth is slow, but it is steady, relentless, and profoundly resilient. Coral reefs are found in warm, shallow waters. Most reef-building corals thrive in tropical and subtropical waters where temperatures remain between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius. They prefer shallow, sunlit areas, usually less than 60 meters deep, where their symbiotic algae can photosynthesize effectively. Clear water is essential too, as sediment and pollution can smother the delicate polyps. These conditions create narrow bands of reef habitat around coastlines and islands, oases of life clinging to the edges of continents in warm, gentle currents. There are three main types of coral reefs. Reefs come in different forms, shaped by geology and time. Fringing reefs grow directly along coastlines, hugging the shore like a living border. Barrier reefs lie farther offshore, separated from land by deeper lagoons. Atolls are ring-shaped reefs that encircle lagoons, often formed around the remnants of sunken volcanic islands. Each type tells a story of how the ocean floor shifted, how islands rose and fell, and how life adapted to fill every available space with color and form. Coral polyps are related to jellyfish. Though they look nothing alike, coral polyps share ancestry with jellyfish and sea anemones. They belong to a group called cnidarians, simple animals with stinging cells used for defense and capturing prey. Like their gelatinous cousins, coral polyps have tentacles that wave gently in the current, catching microscopic plankton and particles of organic matter. At night, many polyps extend their tentacles fully, transforming the reef into a forest of delicate, waving arms, feeding in the darkness. Corals can reproduce both anchually and astually. Corals have two ways of creating new life. Astually, they bud off new polyps, cloning themselves to expand the colony. Agually, they release eggs and sperm into the water during mass spawning events, often triggered by the full moon. These tiny gametes drift through the ocean, meeting and fertilizing in the open water. The resulting larvae float for days or weeks before settling onto a hard surface and beginning a new colony. It's a dual strategy, both careful expansion and wild, hopeful scattering into the unknown. The Great Barrier Reef is over 20,000 years old. Though individual corals may live for centuries, the structure of the Great Barrier Reef as we know it began forming around 20,000 years ago after the last ice age. As sea levels rose and flooded coastal plains, corals colonized the newly submerged land. Layer by layer, generation by generation, they built upward, keeping pace with rising seas. What we see today is a living monument to deep time, a structure older than human civilization, still growing, still adapting. Coral reefs protect coastlines from erosion. Reefs act as natural breakwaters, absorbing the energy of waves and storms before they reach the shore. This protection reduces coastal erosion, prevents flooding, and shields beaches and communities from the full force of tropical cyclones. Without reefs, many island nations and coastal regions would be far more vulnerable to the ocean's power. The reef stands quietly between land and sea, a living barrier that bends but does not break, softening the ocean's relentless push. Some corals glow under ultraviolet light. In the blue twilight of the reef, certain corals produce fluorescent proteins that glow in brilliant greens, reds, and oranges when exposed to ultraviolet light. Scientists believe these proteins may protect the coral's symbiotic algae from intense sunlight, or help attract prey. Under a black light, The reef transforms into an otherworldly landscape, pulsing with hidden colors, invisible to the naked eye. It's a secret language of light, spoken softly in the depths. Parrotfish help create sandy beaches. The soft white sand on tropical beaches owes much of its existence to parrotfish. These colorful reef dwellers use their beak-like teeth to scrape algae from coral surfaces, inadvertently consuming bits of coral skeleton in the process. After digesting the algae, they excrete fine coral sand. A single parrotfish can produce hundreds of kilograms of sand each year. So when you walk on a tropical beach, you're treading on the transformed remains of coral, processed through the digestive system of a fish. Coral reefs are sometimes called the rainforests of the sea. Just as rainforests support incredible biodiversity on land, coral reefs do the same in the ocean. They provide food, shelter, and breeding grounds for countless species, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. The comparison is apt not only in diversity, but also in fragility. Both ecosystems are sensitive to changes in temperature, water quality, and human activity. Both are irreplaceable, and both remind us that the richest places on Earth are often the most delicate. Coral bleaching occurs when corals expel their algae. When corals become stressed by rising temperatures, pollution, or changes in water chemistry, they expel the zooxanthellae living in their tissues. Without these colorful algae, the coral turns ghostly white, a process known as bleaching. Bleached corals are not dead, but they are weakened and vulnerable. If conditions improve, the algae may return. If not, the coral slowly starves. Bleaching events have become more frequent in recent decades, a visible warning written across the reefs in pale, fading colors. Some corals can recover from bleaching. Though bleaching is a sign of distress, not all bleached corals die. If water temperatures drop and stress subsides, corals can reabsorb their symbiotic algae and regain their color and health. Recovery takes time, sometimes months or years, and repeated bleaching events can weaken corals beyond repair. But in quieter times, when the ocean cools and conditions stabilize, the reef has shown a remarkable ability to heal, to rebuild, to persist. Hope, it seems, is woven into the structure of the reef itself. Corals feed at night. During the day, most corals rely on the energy provided by their symbiotic algae. But when darkness falls, the reef transforms. Polyps extend their tentacles, unfurling like tiny flowers in the current. They catch passing zooplankton, organic particles, and even small fish with stinging cells called nematocysts. The reef, so still and solid by day, becomes a garden of movement at night, each polyp reaching, grasping, feeding in the gentle flow of the tide. The polyps in a coral colony are clones. Every polyp in a coral colony is genetically identical, a clone of the original polyp that settled and began the colony. They share nutrients and communication through a connected tissue network. In a sense, the entire colony is a single organism, though it appears as thousands of individual mouths. They grow together, feed together, and face the ocean's challenges as one unified body, a living architecture built from countless copies of a single blueprint. Coral reefs support over 1 million species. Though estimates vary, scientists believe that coral reefs are home to more than 1 million species of plants and animals. Many of these species are still undiscovered or poorly understood. From microscopic plankton to apex predators like sharks, the reef supports an intricate web of life. Each species plays a role, whether as predator, prey, cleaner, or symbiont. The reef is not just a habitat. It's a community, layered and interdependent, where survival is a shared endeavor. Some fish change color to blend with coral. Masters of disguise, many reef fish have evolved the ability to change their color and pattern to match their surroundings. Groupers, scorpionfish, and octopuses can shift hues in seconds, blending seamlessly with coral, rock, or sand. This camouflage helps them avoid predators or ambush prey. The reef is a place of constant watching and hiding, where survival often depends on being unseen. In this world of dappled light and shadow, invisibility is an art. Coral reefs have existed for over 500 million years. Long before dinosaurs walked the earth, coral reefs were already ancient. Fossil evidence shows that reef-building organisms have existed for more than 500 million years. Though the species have changed many times through mass extinctions, shifting climates, and continental drift, reefs have persisted. They have adapted, evolved, and rebuilt. The reefs we see today are part of an unbroken lineage stretching back through deep time, a testament to life's endurance. The sound of a healthy reef can be heard underwater. A thriving coral reef is not silent. It crackles, pops, and hums with the sounds of countless creatures. Snapping shrimp create sharp clicks. Fish grunt, chirp, and grind their teeth. The reef generates a constant soundscape, a biological symphony that travels through the water. Scientists have even found that fish larvae use these sounds to navigate back to the reef after drifting in open water. The reef calls to its children, a song of home echoing through the ocean. Coral reefs are biodiversity hotspots. In ecological terms, a hotspot is an area with exceptional species richness. Coral reefs fit this definition perfectly. Though they cover such a small area, they contain a staggering variety of life forms, many of which exist nowhere else. This makes reefs not only valuable but irreplaceable. Losing a reef doesn't just mean losing coral. It means losing entire species, genetic diversity, and ecological relationships that took millions of years to develop. Some corals are over 4,000 years old. Deep-sea corals, which grow in cold, dark waters without symbiotic algae, can live for thousands of years. Black corals and gold corals have been found with growth rings indicating ages of over 4,000 years. These ancient structures are among the oldest living organisms on Earth, silent witnesses to centuries of ocean change. They grow slowly, just millimeters per decade, accumulating time like layers of memory in their delicate skeletons. Coral reefs provide food for over 1 billion people. For coastal communities around the world, coral reefs are not just beautiful, they are essential. Reefs support fisheries that feed more than 1 billion people, particularly in developing nations. Fish, crustaceans, and mollusks harvested from reef ecosystems provide protein, income, and cultural identity. The health of the reef is directly tied to the health of the people who depend on it. When reefs decline, so do livelihoods, food security, and traditions passed down through generations. Clownfish live in partnership with sea anemones. One of the reef's most famous relationships is between clownfish and sea anemones. The anemone's stinging tentacles, deadly to most fish, provide the clownfish with protection from predators. In return, the clownfish defends the anemone from predators and parasites, and may even bring it food. The clownfish is coated in a special mucus that prevents it from being stung. It's a mutualistic bond where both partners benefit, and neither could thrive as well alone. Some corals release chemicals to compete for space. The reef is not a peaceful place. It's a battlefield where organisms compete fiercely for space and light. Some corals release toxic chemicals or extend sweeper tentacles armed with stinging cells to attack neighboring corals. Slowly, over weeks or months, one coral may overtake another, killing its rival and claiming its territory. This silent war plays out across the reef, unseen by swimmers above, a constant struggle for survival in a crowded, colorful world. Coral larvae can drift for weeks before settling. After spawning, coral larvae, tiny and translucent, drift through the open ocean. They are at the mercy of currents, carried far from their parent colony. Some travel for days, others for weeks. During this time, they are vulnerable to predators and the vastness of the sea. Eventually, if they survive, they must find a suitable hard surface to settle on. Once they attach, they metamorphose into polyps and begin building a new colony. It's a journey of chance, hope, and transformation. Sea turtles rely on coral reefs for food and shelter. Coral reefs are vital habitats for sea turtles, providing feeding grounds and resting places. Hawksbill turtles feed primarily on sponges that grow on the reef. Green turtles graze on seagrass beds often found near reefs. Loggerheads hunt crabs and mollusks among the coral. These ancient reptiles have depended on reefs for millions of years, their life cycles intertwined with the health of the ocean's most vibrant ecosystems. When reefs suffer, so do the turtles. Coral reefs generate billions of dollars in tourism revenue. Beyond their ecological value, coral reefs are economic powerhouses. They attract millions of tourists each year, generating billions of dollars in revenue through diving, snorkeling, and coastal tourism. This income supports jobs, businesses, and entire economies in tropical regions. The beauty of the reef is not just spiritual or biological, it's financial. Protecting reefs is not only an environmental issue, it's an economic necessity for countless communities around the world. Some species of coral are hermaphrodites. Many coral species produce both eggs and sperm, making them hermaphrodites. During mass spawning events, they release both types of gametes into the water at the same time. This increases the chances of fertilization as the water becomes filled with genetic material from many colonies. It's a strategy born of necessity in a vast, unpredictable ocean where finding a mate is impossible, and reproduction depends on timing, currents, and a little bit of luck. Crown-of-thorns starfish can devastate coral reefs. The crown-of-thorns starfish is a natural predator of coral, but when its population explodes, it can cause massive damage. These large, spiny starfish feed by extruding their stomachs over coral and digesting the tissue. Outbreaks have been linked to nutrient pollution, which fuels plankton blooms that feed starfish larvae. A single starfish can consume several square meters of coral per year. When thousands gather, entire reefs can be stripped bare, leaving behind ghostly white skeletons. Coral polyps have stinging cells like jellyfish. Each coral polyp is armed with specialized cells called cnidocytes, which contain tiny, harpoon-like structures filled with toxins. When triggered by touch or chemical signals, these cells fire, injecting venom into prey or predators. It's the same mechanism jellyfish use to sting. Though a single polyp's sting is too weak to harm a human, together they form a formidable defense, and they allow the coral to capture food far larger than itself. The Red Sea is home to some of the most resilient corals. In the northern Red Sea, corals thrive in water temperatures that would bleach or kill corals elsewhere. Scientists believe these corals have adapted over thousands of years to extreme heat, making them some of the most resilient on Earth. Studying these corals may help researchers understand how reefs can adapt to climate change. These heat-tolerant populations offer a glimmer of hope, a genetic reservoir that might one day help restore reefs in warming oceans. Coral reefs can be found in all of the world's oceans. Though most people associate coral reefs with tropical seas, they exist in all major oceans, from the Caribbean to the Indo-Pacific, from the Red Sea to the coast of Australia. There are even deep-sea coral reefs that thrive in cold, dark waters far from sunlight. Reefs are more widespread and diverse than many realize, each adapted to its specific environment, each shaped by local currents, temperatures, and geological history. Some fish clean parasites off larger fish. Cleaner fish, such as cleaner wrasses, perform an essential service on the reef. They set up cleaning stations where larger fish come to have parasites, dead skin, and debris removed from their bodies. The cleaner fish get a meal, and the client fish stays healthy. It's a mutualistic relationship built on trust. Even predators allow cleaner fish to swim into their mouths and gills without harm. On the reef, cooperation is as common as competition. Staghorn and elkhorn corals are critically endangered. Once abundant across the Caribbean, staghorn and elkhorn corals have declined by over 90% in recent decades. Disease, bleaching, hurricanes, and human activity have devastated their populations. Both species are now listed as critically endangered. Their loss is profound, not only because of their ecological importance, but because they are among the fastest-growing corals, crucial for reef recovery. Efforts are underway to restore them through coral nurseries and transplantation, small acts of hope in a changing ocean. Coral reefs can help treat human diseases. Compounds extracted from coral reef organisms have been used to develop treatments for cancer, arthritis, bacterial infections, and other diseases. The biodiversity of the reef is not only beautiful, it's medically valuable. Sponges, algae, and soft corals produce unique chemicals to defend themselves, and these chemicals are being studied for their therapeutic potential. In protecting reefs, we may also be protecting future cures, medicines not yet discovered, waiting quietly in the tissues of reef life. Reefs are sensitive to ocean acidification. As the ocean absorbs more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it becomes more acidic. This process, known as ocean acidification, makes it harder for corals to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. In more acidic water, coral growth slows, and existing structures become more vulnerable to erosion. It's a slow, invisible threat, one that doesn't show immediate damage like bleaching, but undermines the very foundation of the reef. The chemistry of the ocean is shifting, and the reef feels it. Some corals can survive in deeper, cooler waters. Not all corals need sunlight. Deep-sea corals, found at depths of hundreds or even thousands of meters, do not rely on photosynthetic algae. Instead, they capture food directly from the water. These corals grow in cold, dark environments on seamounts, canyons, and continental slopes. Though less colorful than their shallow water cousins, they are just as complex and just as important, providing habitat for deep-sea fish, invertebrates, and other creatures in the ocean's twilight zone. Coral reefs have inspired art, culture, and myth. For centuries, humans have been captivated by coral reefs. Coastal communities have woven reefs into their myths, art, and spiritual practices. The vibrant colors, mysterious depths, and abundance of life have inspired painters, poets, and storytellers. Reefs are not just ecosystems, they are symbols, places of wonder and reverence. They remind us of the ocean's beauty and mystery, and of our deep, ancient connection to the sea. Mangroves and seagrasses support coral reef health. Coral reefs do not exist in isolation. They are part of a larger coastal ecosystem that includes mangrove forests and seagrass beds. Mangroves filter runoff and trap sediment before it reaches the reef. Seagrasses stabilize the seafloor and provide nursery habitat for juvenile fish. Together, these three ecosystems form an interconnected network. Damage to one affects the others. Protecting reefs means protecting mangroves and seagrasses too, a holistic approach to ocean conservation. Coral polyps are surprisingly strong. Despite their soft bodies, coral polyps are capable of incredible feats. They can secrete hard calcium carbonate structures, lift and move sediment, and even repair damage to their colonies. Over time, the collective strength of millions of polyps builds structures that can withstand powerful storms and ocean currents. It's a reminder that strength doesn't always come from size or hardness. Sometimes it comes from cooperation, persistence, and the quiet accumulation of effort over time. Mass coral spawning is synchronized by the moon. Once a year, often just after a full moon, many coral species release their eggs and sperm into the water simultaneously. The timing is so precise that entire reefs spawn within the same few nights. This synchrony maximizes the chances of fertilization and overwhelms predators with sheer numbers. The water becomes thick with floating gametes, a cloudy, swirling snowstorm of life. It's one of the most spectacular reproductive events in nature, a quiet explosion of hope drifting through the dark. Reef fish have evolved vibrant colors for communication. The dazzling colors of reef fish are not just for beauty. They serve as signals, warnings, and identification markers. Bright colors can advertise toxicity, like the bold patterns of lionfish. They can help fish recognize their own species or signal dominance and health to potential mates. In the complex social environment of the reef, color is a language, a way of saying, "Stay away," "Follow me," or "I am strong." Every stripe and spot carries meaning. Some reefs are over 50 million years old. While individual coral colonies may be young, the reef systems themselves can be ancient. Fossil reefs dating back 50 million years or more have been found on land, remnants of ancient seas long since vanished. These fossil reefs tell stories of past climates, ocean levels, and evolutionary history. They remind us that reefs have risen and fallen many times, shaped by the slow, relentless forces of geology and time. Today's reefs are the latest chapter in a very old story. Coral reefs slow down waves and reduce storm damage. The physical structure of a reef acts as a buffer, breaking up wave energy before it reaches the shore. Studies have shown that reefs can reduce wave height by up to 97%, significantly lowering the impact of storms and protecting coastal infrastructure. This natural defense is worth billions of dollars in avoided damage. As reefs degrade, coastlines become more exposed, more vulnerable. Protecting reefs is not just about nature, it's about protecting human communities too. Brain corals can live for over 900 years. These massive, rounded corals, named for their resemblance to human brains, are some of the longest-lived organisms on the reef. Growing slowly over centuries, brain corals can reach several meters in diameter and live for 900 years or more. They have survived hurricanes, bleaching events, and countless changes in ocean conditions. They are living libraries, their growth rings recording environmental changes across centuries. To touch a brain coral is to touch history. Coral mucus protects against infection and UV radiation. Corals produce a slimy mucus layer that coats their surfaces. This mucus serves multiple purposes, trapping sediment and debris, providing a barrier against pathogens, and even offering some protection from harmful ultraviolet radiation. The mucus also contains antimicrobial compounds that prevent infections. It's a dynamic, living shield, constantly secreted and renewed, a quiet defense against the countless threats that surround the coral in the open ocean. The Indo-Pacific region has the highest coral diversity. The Coral Triangle, a region spanning Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands, contains the highest diversity of coral species on Earth. Over 600 species of reef-building corals live here, along with thousands of fish species. This area is the epicenter of marine biodiversity, a living treasure trove. It's also one of the most threatened regions, facing pressures from overfishing, coastal development, and climate change. The richest reefs are also the most fragile. Some corals can live without sunlight. Deep-sea corals, and those living in caves or under ledges, do not rely on photosynthesis. Instead, they capture food particles drifting in the current. These corals tend to grow more slowly and are often white, cream, or pale pink, lacking the vibrant colors of their sunlit relatives. They prove that the coral strategy is adaptable, that life can find a way even in the darkest corners of the ocean, patient, persistent, and quietly determined. Coral reefs are climate change indicators. Because corals are so sensitive to temperature, water quality, and ocean chemistry, they act as early warning systems for environmental change. Bleaching events, shifts in coral cover, and changes in reef health can signal broader problems in the ocean. Scientists monitor reefs closely, using them as living barometers of planetary health. The reef speaks, not in words, but in color, structure, and survival. And right now, it is telling us something urgent. Seahorses anchor themselves to coral and seagrass. With their delicate bodies and weak swimming ability, seahorses rely on coral branches and seagrass blades for stability. They wrap their prehensile tails around structure, holding on as currents flow past. Reefs provide seahorses with shelter, food, and breeding grounds. Without the reef's complex architecture, these strange, enchanting creatures would struggle to survive. They are yet another thread in the reef's intricate web, small but significant, vulnerable but enduring. Coral reefs help regulate ocean chemistry. Through their growth and metabolism, corals play a role in the ocean's carbon cycle. They absorb carbon dioxide to build their calcium carbonate skeletons, effectively locking carbon away in solid form. While this process is small compared to other oceanic carbon sinks, it's part of a larger planetary system. Reefs are not passive structures. They are active participants in the chemistry of the sea, shaping the water around them in subtle but meaningful ways. Some reefs glow at night with bioluminescence. Though not the corals themselves, many organisms living on and around the reef produce bioluminescent light. Certain plankton, jellyfish, and even some fish emit soft glows in the darkness. When disturbed, they flash and sparkle, turning the night reef into a living constellation. Divers who explore reefs after dark often describe the experience as magical, a world illuminated not by the sun, but by the quiet glow of life itself. Nudibranchs are colorful reef residents. These sea slugs, often called nudibranchs, are among the reef's most visually stunning inhabitants. They come in every color imaginable: neon pink, electric blue, fiery orange, striped, spotted, and swirled. Despite their beauty, many are toxic or distasteful to predators, their bright colors serving as warnings. Nudibranchs glide slowly across coral and rock, feeding on sponges, hydroids, and other small invertebrates. They are the reef's living jewels, soft, slow, and utterly mesmerizing. Coral reefs are under threat from plastic pollution. Plastic debris, from microplastics to abandoned fishing nets, poses a growing threat to coral reefs. Plastics can smother corals, block sunlight, introduce toxins, and spread disease. Entangled nets, known as ghost nets, continue to trap and kill marine life long after they've been discarded. Corals that come into contact with plastic are more likely to become diseased. The reef, already stressed by warming waters, must now contend with the slow accumulation of human waste drifting through its fragile structures. Some corals can expel harmful algae and survive. In addition to their symbiotic zooxanthellae, corals can sometimes host harmful or parasitic algae. When conditions change, corals have been observed expelling these harmful strains and replacing them with more beneficial ones. This ability to choose their symbionts may help corals adapt to changing conditions, a form of flexibility that could be crucial in a warming ocean. It's a small act of resilience, a quiet adjustment that speaks to the reef's will to survive. The Great Barrier Reef is a World Heritage Site. Recognized for its outstanding universal value, the Great Barrier Reef was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1981. This status is meant to ensure its protection for future generations, acknowledging its ecological, scientific, and cultural significance. But designation alone is not enough. The reef still faces threats from climate change, coastal development, and pollution. Its protection depends not just on recognition, but on action, commitment, and care. Reef sharks are apex predators that maintain balance. Sharks like the reef whitetip and blacktip play crucial roles in reef ecosystems as top predators. They regulate fish populations, remove sick or weak individuals, and help maintain the balance between species. Without sharks, prey populations can explode, leading to overgrazing of algae and coral. Healthy reefs need their predators. The presence of sharks is a sign of a functioning, balanced ecosystem, a reminder that every creature, even the feared ones, has a role to play. Coral colonies can clone themselves through fragmentation. In the life of a coral reef, destruction and creation are not opposites. They are partners woven together in a cycle as old as the ocean itself. When a storm tears through the reef, when waves crash with brutal force, or when a careless anchor drags across the delicate branches, pieces of coral break away. They tumble through the water, small fragments spinning in the current, dislodged from the colony that grew them. It would be easy to assume that these broken pieces are lost, that they will settle on the sand and slowly dissolve, their calcium skeletons returning to the sea. And sometimes that is exactly what happens, but not always. Not if the conditions are right. If the fragment lands on a hard surface, a rock, a piece of old coral skeleton, even a shell, it has a chance to hold on, a chance to survive. And if the water is warm enough, if the light is sufficient, if the currents bring food, and the fragment is not smothered by sand or algae, something remarkable happens. It begins to grow. The polyps within the fragment, though separated from their parent colony, are still alive. They are clones, genetically identical to the thousands of other polyps that made up the original structure. and they do what they have always done. They extend their tentacles, they feed, they secrete calcium carbonate, building a new skeleton, layer by microscopic layer. Over weeks, the fragment stabilizes. Over months, it begins to spread. New polyps bud from the original ones, expanding the colony outward. What was once a broken piece, a casualty of the storm, becomes a new coral colony, a fresh start in a different part of the reef. It is not a seed, it is not a larva, it is a clone, a genetic copy, but it is also a new beginning. This process is called fragmentation, and it is one of the ways corals reproduce asexually. Unlike asexual reproduction, which involves the mixing of genes from two parents, fragmentation creates identical offspring. It is fast, efficient, and does not require the luck and timing of spawning events. It is a survival strategy that allows corals to spread, to recover from damage, and to colonize new areas of the reef. And it is also the basis for one of the most hopeful efforts in coral conservation. Scientists and reef restoration teams around the world have learned to harness fragmentation, turning it into a tool for healing. They collect small fragments from healthy coral colonies, pieces that would naturally break off over time, and they grow them in underwater nurseries. There, attached to ropes, racks, or specially designed structures, the fragments are cared for, cleaned, and protected as they grow. When the fragments reach a certain size, they are carefully transplanted onto damaged sections of reef. Divers secure them with marine epoxy or small pins, giving them a stable foundation. And then nature takes over. The fragments continue to grow. They fuse with the reef. They attract fish. They become part of the ecosystem once more. In this way, broken pieces become new hope. What was once seen as destruction is now seen as opportunity. The storm that shattered the coral also created the fragments that will rebuild it. It is a cycle, quiet and patient, where loss and renewal are two sides of the same coin. The reef does not give up. It adapts. It clones itself. It begins again. And in the hands of those who care for it, fragmentation becomes more than a biological process. It becomes an act of faith, a belief that even the most broken things can grow whole again, that even the smallest piece carries within it the potential for something beautiful, something enduring, something alive. Butterfly fish are indicator species for reef health. If you want to know how a reef is truly doing, look for the butterfly fish. These small, delicate creatures, with their bright yellow bodies, black stripes, and fluttering, almost nervous movements, are among the most sensitive indicators of reef health. They do not hide what the reef is feeling. They wear it plainly, in their numbers, their behavior, and their presence. Butterfly fish are specialists. Unlike many reef fish, which can adapt to a variety of diets, butterfly fish feed primarily on coral polyps. They use their long, narrow snouts to reach into the crevices of coral colonies, nipping at the soft tissue with precision. Some species are so specialized that they feed on only one or two types of coral. They are picky eaters, and that pickiness makes them vulnerable. When coral cover is high and the reef is healthy, butterfly fish populations thrive. There is plenty of food. There are places to hide, to breed, to raise their young. They dart among the coral branches in pairs, often mated for life, moving together like synchronized dancers. Their colors flash in the dappled sunlight. Their presence is a sign that the reef is functioning as it should, balanced, abundant, alive. But when coral cover begins to decline, when bleaching events turn vibrant colonies ghostly white, When disease spreads or pollution smothers the polyps, the butterfly fish are among the first to feel it. Their food source disappears. The structure they depend on for shelter begins to crumble, and they cannot adapt quickly enough. Their populations drop, sometimes rapidly, sometimes within just a few years. Scientists have learned to use butterfly fish as living gauges, biological indicators that reflect the state of the reef. By counting butterfly fish, by monitoring their numbers over time, researchers can assess reef health without needing to examine every coral colony in detail. Where butterfly fish are abundant, the reef is usually in good condition. Where they are scarce or absent, the reef is in trouble. It is a bittersweet relationship. The butterfly fish, so beautiful and delicate, become messengers of decline. Their absence is a warning, a signal that something is wrong, that the reef is struggling. But their presence, too, carries meaning. It says that the reef is still holding on, that there is still life, still food, still hope. They are not loud. They do not announce their findings. They simply swim or they do not. They feed or they vanish. And in their quiet way they tell the story of the reef not in words, but in their very existence. They are witnesses, fragile and honest, to the health of the ocean around them. To see a pair of butterfly fish gliding through the coral, their bodies glowing in the filtered light, is to see a reef that is still functioning. To swim through an area and see none, to notice the absence, the silence, is to feel the weight of what has been lost. They are indicators, yes, but they are also reminders that the health of the reef is not abstract. It is embodied, lived, felt by every creature that calls it home. Some reefs have survived multiple bleaching events. Not all reefs are equal in their strength. Not all corals are equally fragile. Across the world's oceans, scientists have discovered something both humbling and hopeful. Some reefs have survived repeated bleaching events, recovering again and again, even as others nearby have collapsed and died. Bleaching, the process by which corals expel their symbiotic algae in response to stress, is one of the most visible signs of a reef in crisis. The corals turn white, ghostly, stripped of the vibrant colors that once defined them. Without their algae, they are starving, weakened, vulnerable. Many do not survive, but some do, and some do so multiple times. These resilient reefs are scattered across the globe. Some are in the Red Sea, where corals have adapted to extreme heat over thousands of years. Others are in the Pacific, in areas with strong water flow that helps regulate temperature and bring nutrients. Still others are in places where the genetic diversity of the coral populations is high, allowing for natural selection to favor the hardiest individuals. Resilience is not uniform. It is shaped by geography, by genetics, by the specific conditions of each reef. Some corals have genes that allow them to tolerate higher temperatures. Others have symbiotic algae that are more heat-resistant. Some reefs benefit from upwelling currents that bring cooler water from the depths, providing relief during heat waves. Others are simply lucky, situated in areas where the worst of the warming has not yet reached. Studying these resilient reefs has become a priority for scientists. If we can understand what makes some corals more adaptable, what allows some reefs to survive when others cannot, we may be able to use that knowledge to help other reefs. Perhaps resilient corals can be bred and transplanted. Perhaps we can identify and protect the conditions that support resilience, like water flow patterns or genetic diversity. These reefs offer something more than data. They offer hope. They show us that not all reefs are doomed, that adaptation is possible, that even in a warming ocean, Some corals will persist, will bend without breaking, will recover and grow and continue the ancient work of reef building. They are proof that life is tougher than we sometimes believe, that resilience is not just a word, but a real, measurable quality that can make the difference between survival and extinction. Of course, resilience has its limits. Even the toughest reefs cannot withstand endless stress. If the ocean continues to warm, if bleaching events become more frequent and more severe, even these survivors may eventually falter. Resilience buys time, but it is not invincibility. The reef can adapt, but only so much, only so fast. Still, these reefs carry the legacy of the ocean forward. They are the ones that may still be standing when the worst has passed. They are the seeds of the future, the reservoirs of genetic diversity, the hope that the reef, in some form, will endure. And in their survival, quiet and determined, we see a glimpse of what the ocean might look like if we give it a chance. Not perfect, not untouched, but alive, adapting, and still building, one polyp at a time. Coral reefs are sometimes called undersea pharmacies. Beneath the waves, among the coral branches and sandy crevices, there is a hidden treasure. Not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable: medicine, cures, compounds that could save lives, ease suffering, and unlock mysteries we have yet to understand. The reef is not just a habitat. It is a living library of chemistry, a laboratory where organisms have been developing and refining their defenses for millions of years. Coral reefs are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth, and with that diversity comes an extraordinary variety of chemical compounds. Sponges, soft corals, algae, and countless other reef organisms produce unique substances to protect themselves from predators, fight off infections, or compete for space. These compounds are often highly specialized, finely tuned, and unlike anything found on land. Scientists have long recognized the medical potential of these natural chemicals. Over the years, researchers have isolated compounds from reef organisms that show promise in treating cancer, fighting viruses, reducing inflammation, and even combating antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Some of these compounds are already in use. Others are still being studied, undergoing trials, waiting to see if they can make the leap from the reef to the clinic. Sponges, in particular, are chemical factories. They are sessile, meaning they cannot move, so they rely on chemistry to defend themselves. They produce toxins, antibiotics, and other bioactive compounds that deter predators and prevent other organisms from settling on their surfaces. Some of these compounds have shown remarkable potential. One, derived from a Caribbean sponge, is being used to develop treatments for certain types of cancer. Another, from a sponge in the Pacific, has antiviral properties that could one day help fight diseases like HIV. But the reef's pharmacy is fragile. As reefs decline, as species go extinct, we lose not only the organisms themselves, but the unique chemistry they carry. Every species that disappears takes with it millions of years of evolutionary experimentation, a library of compounds that we may never have the chance to study. The loss is not just ecological, it is medical, it is economic, it is human. Imagine a cure for a deadly disease, locked away in the tissues of a sponge that lives on a single reef. Now imagine that reef bleaching, collapsing, disappearing before the sponge is ever studied. The cure is lost, not because we lack the technology to discover it, but because the organism that held it no longer exists. It is a sobering thought, and it is happening. The reef is more than a beautiful place to visit, More than a home for fish and turtles, it is a source of hope, a place where nature has already done the hard work of developing complex, effective chemical solutions. All we have to do is look, to study, to learn. But we are running out of time. Protecting coral reefs is not just about preserving beauty or biodiversity for its own sake, though those are reason enough. It is also about protecting the future of medicine, the potential cures that could one day save lives, ease pain, and change the trajectory of human health. The reef holds answers to questions we have not yet learned to ask, and if we lose it, we lose those answers forever. Groupers can change their SX as they age. Life on the reef is full of surprises, and few are as unexpected as the groupers' ability to rewrite their own biology. These large, slow-moving fish, with their thick bodies, wide mouths, and watchful eyes, seem solid, unchanging, permanent. But beneath the surface, they carry a secret, a flexibility written into their very genes. Many species of groupers are what scientists call protogynous hermaphrodites. It is a long word for a simple but remarkable concept. They are born female. They live as females for much of their lives. They spawn, releasing eggs into the water, contributing to the next generation. But as they age, as they grow larger and more dominant, something shifts. When a dominant male dies or is removed from the population, the largest female in the group undergoes a transformation. Over the course of weeks or months, her body changes, her reproductive organs restructure, her behavior shifts. She becomes a male, not in name or appearance alone, but biologically, functionally. She, now he, takes on the role of the breeding male, spawning with the remaining females and ensuring the continuation of the population. This ability is not unique to groupers. It is found in many reef fish, including wrasses, parrotfish, and some types of angelfish. But it is particularly well studied in groupers, and it offers a fascinating glimpse into the flexibility of life, the ways in which biology can adapt to circumstance. Why would such a strategy evolve? The answer lies in reproductive success. In many grouper species, a single large male can fertilize the eggs of multiple females. It is more efficient to have one dominant male than to have equal numbers of both SXs. But if that male is lost, the population is in trouble. By allowing the largest female to transition, the species ensures that there is always a male available, that reproduction can continue even when numbers are low. It is a form of biological insurance, a quiet adaptation that helps the species survive in an unpredictable world. The grouper does not choose to change. It is not a conscious decision. It is a response, triggered by hormones, by the absence of a dominant male, by the needs of the population. The body knows what to do, and it does it. This flexibility is a reminder that SX in the natural world is not always as fixed as we might assume. It is not always binary. It is not always permanent. For groupers and for many other reef fish, it is fluid, responsive, shaped by the circumstances of life. It is survival written in biology, a strategy that has worked for millions of years. But even this flexibility has its limits. When grouper populations are overfished, when the large individuals are targeted and removed, the balance is disrupted. Females may transition too young before they have had a chance to spawn as females. The population skews male and reproductive success drops. The very adaptation that once ensured survival becomes a vulnerability when humans enter the equation. The grouper's story is one of resilience, but also of fragility. It shows us that even the most adaptable creatures can be pushed too far, that even the most elegant biological strategies can be undone by external pressures. And it reminds us, gently but firmly, that the reef and all the creatures within it are not separate from us. We are part of the same system, and what we do, whether we mean to or not, ripples through their lives. Coral spawning can be triggered by water temperature. The reef does not announce its plans, it does not send invitations or mark the calendar, but it waits patiently for the right moment. And when that moment comes, when the conditions are perfect, the reef transforms into one of the most spectacular reproductive events in the natural world. Coral spawning is a synchronized phenomenon where corals across entire reefs release their eggs and sperm into the water at the same time. It happens once a year, sometimes twice, depending on the species and location. And though the full moon often plays a role in triggering the event, water temperature is just as important, perhaps even more so. As the seasons shift, as spring turns to summer in tropical waters, the ocean begins to warm. The change is subtle, just a few degrees, but it is enough. Corals are finely tuned to their environment. They sense the temperature of the water through mechanisms we are only beginning to understand. They track the days, the lunar cycles, the quality of the light. They are waiting, sensing, preparing. When the water reaches the right temperature, not too cold, not too hot, it signals to the corals that conditions are favorable for reproduction. The ocean is warm enough for larvae to survive. The food supply, often tied to seasonal plankton blooms, is abundant. The timing is right, and so the corals respond. Inside each polyp, tiny bundles of eggs and sperm have been forming for weeks. They are held within the coral's tissues, growing, maturing, waiting. And then, on a single night, often just after the full moon, the corals release them. Millions upon millions of gametes drift upward like an underwater snowstorm in reverse, filling the water with clouds of pink, orange, and white. The timing is so precise that entire reefs spawn within the same few hours. It is a synchronized explosion of life, an event so massive that the water becomes thick with floating eggs and sperm. Predators gather, feeding on the bounty, but there is simply too much for them to consume. The sheer volume ensures that many gametes will survive, will drift, will meet and fertilize in the open water. The exact mechanisms that trigger spawning are still being studied. Scientists know that temperature, lunar cycles, and daylight all play a role, but the precise signals remain partially mysterious. What is clear is that corals are not passive. They are responsive. They are attuned to their environment in ways that we are only beginning to appreciate. They wait, they sense, and when the moment is perfect, they release their legacy into the sea. It is not random, it is not accidental, it is the result of millions of years of evolution, a finely tuned biological clock that responds to the rhythms of the ocean, the turning of the seasons, the warming of the water. In this quiet waiting, in this patient sensing, we see the reef as it truly is, not a static landscape, but a living, responsive system. One that knows, in its own way, when the time is right to begin again. Some sponges on reefs are older than the coral. Sponges are ancient, simple animals that have existed for over 600 million years. On coral reefs, certain sponge species can live for hundreds, even thousands of years, far longer than the corals around them. They filter vast amounts of water, removing bacteria and organic particles, playing a vital role in reef ecology. Silent, sessile, and often overlooked, sponges are the reef's quiet elders, filtering, cleaning, enduring. Coral reefs can recover if given time and protection. Despite the challenges they face, coral reefs have shown an ability to bounce back when conditions improve. Reducing local stressors like overfishing, pollution, and coastal development gives reefs a better chance to recover from bleaching and disease. Marine protected areas where fishing and extraction are limited often show faster recovery rates. The reef wants to heal. It has evolved to survive, to rebuild. What it needs most is time, space, and our help. Moray eels hide in coral crevices. In the shadowed spaces of the reef, where sunlight struggles to reach and the water grows cool and dim, moray eels make their homes. With long, muscular bodies that ripple like ribbons in the current, and mouths lined with rows of sharp, backward-curving teeth. They are among the reef's most formidable predators. But for most of the day, you wouldn't know they were there. They tuck themselves deep into cracks and crevices within the coral, their bodies coiled in tight spirals, hidden from view. Only their heads emerge, poking out just enough to watch the world pass by. Their eyes, small and dark, follow movement with patient intensity. They breathe by opening and closing their mouths, a rhythm that looks almost like a yawn, drawing water over their gills in the stillness. During the daylight hours, moray eels are watchers. They do not hunt, they do not chase. They simply wait, motionless as parrotfish nibble at algae, as angelfish drift past in pairs, as the reef goes about its busy, sunlit business. The eel is a shadow in the architecture, a guardian of the hidden places, silent and unmoving. But when night falls and the reef transforms, the moray eel awakens. It slides out from its rocky shelter, its body undulating with smooth, serpentine grace. In the darkness, it becomes a hunter. It moves through the labyrinth of coral with an almost eerie precision, guided by an acute sense of smell. Its nostrils flare, tasting the water for the scent of prey. Moray eels hunt fish, octopuses, and crustaceans. They are opportunistic, patient, and surprisingly fast when the moment calls for it. Some species hunt cooperatively with groupers, a rare partnership between fish. The grouper signals to the eel, and together they flush prey from hiding spots neither could access alone. It's a silent language, a bond formed over countless nights beneath the waves. Despite their fearsome appearance, those gaping mouths and needle-like teeth, moray eels are generally shy creatures. They do not seek confrontation with humans. In fact, they prefer to avoid us entirely. Divers who encounter them often find the eels retreating quickly into their holes, watching warily from the safety of the rock. An eel will only bite if threatened, cornered, or mistaken for food. Most of the time, they are simply observers, content to let the world move around them. They are part of the reef's hidden world, the creatures who live in the in-between spaces, the watchers in the shadows, patient, still, and draped in quiet mystery. To see a moray eel peeking from its den is to glimpse a side of the reef that many never notice, the side that waits, that breathes slowly, that comes alive only when the sun has set and the ocean grows dark and full of secrets. The oldest known coral reef fossils are 500 million years old. Long before humans walked the earth, before dinosaurs ruled the land, even before plants took root on the continents, there were reefs. Ancient, strange, and teeming with life, these early underwater structures were built not by the corals we know today, but by distant relatives, organisms that inhabited a world almost unimaginable to us now. These ancient reef builders are known as rugose and tabulate corals. They thrived during the Paleozoic era, a time when the oceans were warmer, shallower, and filled with creatures that have no modern counterparts. Trilobites scuttled across the seafloor, ammonites spiraled through the water, and among them these early corals grew, layer upon layer, building great underwater ridges and mounds that stretched for miles. Rugose corals, sometimes called horn corals, had solitary cone-shaped skeletons with intricate internal ridges. Tabulate corals, on the other hand, formed colonies, their tiny tubes packed tightly together like honeycomb. Together they created ecosystems as complex and vibrant as any reef today. They provided shelter, food, and structure for countless other species. They shaped the ocean floor, they filtered the water, they were the architects of an ancient sea. But they did not last forever. At the end of the Permian period, around 250 million years ago, a catastrophic mass extinction event wiped out the vast majority of life on Earth. The rugose and tabulate corals vanished entirely, their reef-building era brought to a sudden, violent end. For millions of years the oceans fell silent, the reefs disappeared, and yet the story did not end there. Life, as it so often does, found a way to begin again. New types of corals evolved, the scleractinian corals, the ones we see today. They were not direct descendants of the ancient reef builders, but they filled the same ecological role. They secreted calcium carbonate, they formed colonies, they built reefs. The fossil reefs of the rugose and tabulate corals remain preserved in stone, offering us glimpses into oceans that existed 500 million years ago. Geologists find them in mountain ranges, in desert cliffs, in places that were once underwater but have since been lifted by the slow, relentless forces of plate tectonics. These fossils tell stories of ancient climates, of warm, shallow seas, of life adapting and thriving in ways we can only piece together from the fragments left behind. Modern corals are not the heirs of those ancient builders, but they inherited the same strategy, the same blueprint. The reef-building approach has been reinvented, rediscovered, rebuilt multiple times across the eons. It is proof, quiet and enduring, that certain forms of life are simply too successful, too elegant, too necessary to disappear entirely. The reef has risen and fallen. It has been destroyed and reborn. And through it all, across 500 million years, the idea of the reef, a structure built by tiny creatures, a place of shelter and abundance, has persisted. It is one of the oldest stories on Earth, written not in words, but in stone, in calcium, and in the patient, tireless work of life itself. Some corals have symbiotic relationships with crabs and shrimp. The reef is not just a collection of corals and fish. It is a web of relationships, delicate and intricate, where survival often depends not on strength or speed, but on partnership. Among the most fascinating of these partnerships are the bonds between corals and the tiny crustaceans that live within their branches. Crabs and shrimp, no bigger than a fingernail, make their homes deep within the protective arms of branching corals like staghorn and elkhorn. These corals, with their complex, interlocking structures, provide the perfect hiding place. The tiny residents nestle into the coral's embrace, shielded from the open water and the countless predators that patrol the reef. But this is not a one-sided arrangement. The crabs and shrimp do not simply take shelter and give nothing in return. They are guards, protectors, tiny soldiers defending their coral home from danger. When a crown-of-thorns starfish, one of the reef's most destructive predators, approaches the coral, the resident crabs and shrimp spring into action. They nip at the starfish's tube feet, pinch its arms, and drive it away. A single starfish can consume vast amounts of coral tissue, but the presence of these small defenders can make the difference between survival and destruction. Similarly, certain snails that feed on coral polyps are deterred by the vigilant crustaceans. The shrimp patrol the coral's surface, sensing vibrations and chemical signals that indicate the presence of a threat. When danger is near, they respond swiftly, aggressively, fearlessly. Despite their size, they are fierce. In return, the coral provides more than just shelter. It offers food in the form of mucus, organic particles, and tiny organisms that drift into the colony. The relationship is mutualistic. Both partners benefit, both depend on the other. The coral is safer, the crustaceans are fed and protected. It is a quiet, unseen alliance, one of countless such partnerships that hold the reef together. These relationships are another layer of complexity on the reef, where life is not just a struggle for survival, but also a dance of cooperation. Not all interactions are competitive. Not all creatures are adversaries. Some, like the coral and its tiny guardians, have learned to rely on one another, to share the burden of existence, to thrive together in a world that can be harsh and unforgiving. It is a reminder that the reef is not just a place. It is a community, a network, a living system where relationships matter, where trust is built not in words but in action, and where even the smallest creatures can play a role in something far larger than themselves. In the shelter of the coral, in the vigilance of the shrimp, we see life as it truly is, interconnected, interdependent, and quietly, beautifully cooperative. Reef restoration projects are planting hope in waters around the world, From the Caribbean to the Pacific, from the Red Sea to the coasts of Southeast Asia, something remarkable is happening. People are planting corals, not in gardens on land, but underwater, in the damaged, struggling reefs that have been battered by storms, bleaching, pollution, and time. These are reef restoration projects, and they represent one of the most hopeful, hands-on efforts to heal the ocean. Scientists, conservationists, divers, and local communities are working together, often in difficult conditions, to give the reef a chance to recover. It is labor-intensive. It is expensive. It requires patience, expertise, and unwavering commitment. But it is working. The process begins in coral nurseries, underwater structures where coral fragments are carefully grown. These fragments, often broken pieces from healthy colonies or fast-growing species, are attached to ropes, racks, or artificial trees suspended in the water. There, they are tended like plants in a garden. They are cleaned of algae. They are monitored for disease. They are protected from predators. Over months or years, the fragments grow. They branch out, their polyps multiplying, their skeletons thickening. When they reach a certain size, they are carefully harvested and transplanted onto degraded areas of the reef. Divers use marine epoxy or small wires to attach the corals to the rocky substrate, giving them a stable foundation to continue growing. It is delicate work. The corals are fragile. The conditions must be right. But when it succeeds, the results are profound. The transplanted corals continue to grow. They provide structure. Fish begin to return, sheltering in the new branches. Algae is grazed. The ecosystem starts to rebuild itself, slowly, naturally, as it has done for millions of years. In some places, entire sections of reef that were once barren and lifeless are now vibrant again, filled with color, movement, and the quiet hum of life. Young corals are spawning, parrotfish are nibbling, sea turtles are returning. It is not a complete solution. Restoration alone cannot save the reefs if the root causes of their decline, warming oceans, pollution, overfishing, are not addressed. But it buys time. It creates pockets of resilience. It shows that recovery is possible. These projects are more than just science. They are acts of love. They are statements of belief that the reef is worth saving, that the future can still be bright, that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, small actions matter. Every coral planted is a seed of hope. Every restored patch of reef is a testament to what humans can do when we choose to heal rather than harm. Around the world, hands are reaching into the water, not to take, but to give, to rebuild, to restore. And in the quiet depths, the reef is responding, slowly, carefully, but unmistakably. It is growing again. Lionfish are invasive predators in some reefs. Beauty can be deceptive. Few creatures on the reef are as visually stunning as the lionfish, with its flowing, fan-like fins, bold stripes of red, white, and brown, and delicate feather-like spines that trail behind it like a royal cloak. It drifts through the water with a kind of lazy elegance, almost hypnotic in its grace. But beneath that beauty lies a predator, efficient, voracious, and in some parts of the world, devastatingly destructive. Lionfish are native to the warm waters of the Indo-Pacific, where they have existed for millennia as part of a balanced ecosystem. There, they have natural predators and competitors. Their populations are kept in check. They are one thread in a complex web, neither dominant nor destructive, simply part of the whole. But in the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico, and along the eastern coast of the United States, lionfish are invaders. They do not belong there. No one is entirely sure how they arrived, though most scientists believe they were released into the wild by aquarium owners who no longer wanted them, or perhaps escaped during a hurricane that damaged a coastal facility. However they got there, they thrived. In these new waters, lionfish have no natural predators. Sharks, groupers, and other large fish do not recognize them as prey. Their venomous spines, while not deadly to humans, are painful and effective at deterring attacks. Without predators to control their numbers, lionfish populations have exploded. And they are hungry. A single lionfish can consume dozens of small fish in a single day. They target juvenile fish, the young of species that are vital to the reef's health. They eat cleaners, herbivores, and the offspring of commercially important species. Their feeding is relentless, methodical, and devastating. Studies have shown that in areas with high lionfish populations, native fish numbers can drop by up to 90% within just a few years. The impact ripples through the ecosystem. With fewer herbivorous fish to graze on algae, the algae grows unchecked, smothering corals. With fewer cleaner fish, parasites increase. The balance of the reef, so carefully maintained over thousands of years, is thrown into chaos. The lionfish, beautiful and deadly, is reshaping the underwater landscape one bite at a time. Efforts are underway to control their spread. Divers organize lionfish hunting events, spearing the fish and removing them from the reef. Some restaurants have begun serving lionfish, promoting them as a sustainable, delicious seafood option. Their white, flaky meat is said to be excellent, and by eating them, humans can help reduce their numbers. But it is an uphill battle. Lionfish reproduce quickly, and they are difficult to catch. They hide in crevices during the day and are wary of divers. Eradicating them entirely may be impossible. The best hope is to keep their populations low enough that native species can survive and the reef can maintain some semblance of balance. The lionfish is a reminder, stark and unsettling, that even the reef, with all its resilience and ancient wisdom, can be tipped by human actions. Sometimes those actions are intentional, like overfishing or pollution. Sometimes they are accidental, like the release of a single fish into the wrong ocean. But the consequences are real. The reef is not invincible. It can be harmed, and once the balance is broken, it is difficult, sometimes impossible to restore. Coral reefs are living time capsules. Beneath the shifting tides and drifting currents, coral reefs are quietly recording history. Each layer of calcium carbonate laid down by coral polyps contains information, tiny clues about the world at the time it was formed. Temperature, ocean chemistry, even traces of pollution, all of it is embedded in the structure, preserved like pages in a book, waiting to be read. Scientists have learned to drill cores from massive coral colonies, extracting long cylindrical samples that reveal growth bands, much like the rings of a tree. These bands form annually, sometimes even seasonally, and by studying them, researchers can look back in time, sometimes hundreds of years, to understand how the ocean has changed. The width of a growth band can indicate how fast the coral was growing, which in turn reflects water temperature and nutrient availability. Wider bands suggest favorable conditions. Narrower bands hint at stress, perhaps from bleaching or disease. Chemical analysis of the calcium carbonate reveals even more. Ratios of oxygen isotopes can indicate past sea surface temperatures. Trace elements like strontium and barium reflect changes in salinity and upwelling patterns. Even human impacts are recorded. Corals growing near industrial areas may contain elevated levels of heavy metals or pollutants, marking the beginning of the industrial age or the arrival of certain industries. In this way, corals become archives, witnesses to the transformation of the ocean over the past few centuries. One of the most valuable insights from coral cores is the understanding of long-term climate patterns. Corals have helped scientists identify natural climate cycles, such as El Niño and La Niña events, and compare them to current trends. They have revealed that the ocean is warming faster now than at any point in the recent past, and that the changes we are seeing today are unprecedented in the coral's long memory. The reef remembers. It remembers calm years and stormy ones. It remembers the arrival of pollution and the warming of the seas. It remembers because it has no choice. Every day it grows, and in growing it records. The past is written in calcium and time, layer by layer, year by year, century by century. These living time capsules offer more than just a glimpse into history. They offer a warning. They show us what is changing, how quickly, and what might lie ahead if those changes continue. The reef speaks, not in words, but in chemistry, in structure, in the quiet testimony of its growth. And if we listen carefully, if we study those layers with patience and respect, we can learn from what it has to say. Some corals can move slowly across the seafloor. When we think of corals, we picture them as fixed, rooted, immovable. They are the foundation of the reef, the bedrock upon which everything else is built. But not all corals are content to stay in one place. A few, like the mushroom corals, have evolved the ability to move slowly, carefully across the ocean floor. Mushroom corals are solitary corals, meaning they do not form colonies. Each one is a single, large polyp shaped like a mushroom or a dome, sitting free on the sandy or rocky bottom. They are often brightly colored, pink, green, or brown, and their surfaces are covered in delicate tentacles that wave gently in the current. Unlike most corals, which are permanently attached to the substrate, mushroom corals can shift their position. They do this by inflating their tissues with water, creating internal pressure that allows them to rock or tilt. By repeatedly expanding and contracting, they can inch their way across the seafloor, moving just a few centimeters per day, sometimes less. Why would a coral need to move? The answer lies in survival. Coral reefs are dynamic environments and conditions can change quickly. Sand can accumulate, burying a coral and blocking its access to sunlight. Algae can overgrow nearby areas, shading the coral and reducing the light available for its symbiotic zooxanthellae. Predators or competitors might settle too close, threatening the coral's space and resources. By moving, even slowly, mushroom corals can escape unfavorable conditions. If sediment begins to cover them, they can shift away. If shade creeps over them, they can migrate toward brighter areas. If a predator settles nearby, they can inch out of reach. It is a slow journey, patient and deliberate, but it is movement nonetheless. This ability is a reminder that even the reef's most stationary residents have strategies for survival. They are not passive, they are not helpless. They sense their environment, respond to changes, and take action, however slow and subtle that action may be. The reef is not a frozen tableau. It is alive, shifting, adjusting, constantly adapting to the world around it. Watching a mushroom coral move is like watching a stone breathe. It is almost imperceptible, easy to miss if you are not paying attention, but it is there, a quiet, determined shuffle across the sand. It is life refusing to be still, even when stillness seems like the only option. It is resilience in its most patient form, measured not in leaps or bounds, but in millimeters, in slow, steady persistence. The health of coral reefs affects global fisheries. The reef is not just a local treasure, a colorful patch of ocean tucked away near a tropical shore. It is a global resource, a nursery for fish species that travel across oceans, a foundation for fisheries that feed millions of people, and an economic engine that supports livelihoods far beyond the water's edge. Many of the fish we catch and eat spend part of their lives on coral reefs. They are born there, in the sheltered nooks and crannies of the reef, where the structure provides safety from predators. They feed there, growing strong on the abundance of plankton, algae, and small invertebrates. And when they are large enough, they move into deeper waters, joining adult populations that range across the open ocean. Snappers, groupers, jacks, and many other commercially important species follow this pattern. Without the reef, they would have nowhere to hide as juveniles, and their populations would collapse. The reef is their cradle, the place where the next generation is raised. When reefs decline, so do fish populations. And when fish populations drop, the impact is felt far and wide. In tropical regions, where fishing is a primary source of food and income, the health of the reef directly affects the health of the people. Communities that have relied on reef fisheries for generations suddenly find their catches dwindling. Malnutrition increases, poverty deepens. Traditions that have been passed down for centuries begin to fade as the ocean can no longer provide as it once did. But the impact is not limited to tropical nations. Many fish species migrate long distances, and the global seafood market is deeply interconnected. A decline in reef health in the Caribbean can affect fish availability in markets in North America. A collapse of reef fisheries in Southeast Asia can ripple through global supply chains. The reef is not isolated, it is part of a larger system, and its health matters to everyone. Beyond the direct impact on fisheries, reefs also support other industries. They protect coastlines from erosion, which in turn protects the infrastructure, homes, and businesses that line the shore. They attract tourists, generating billions of dollars in revenue each year. They provide raw materials for pharmaceuticals and research. The reef is not just a habitat, it is a lifeline. When we talk about saving the reefs, we are not just talking about preserving a beautiful exotic place for its own sake, though that is reason enough. We are talking about protecting a system that supports human life, that feeds families, that sustains economies, that underpins entire ways of life. The reef is not separate from us. It is woven into the fabric of our world, and its fate is tied to our own. Coral polyps digest their prey outside their bodies. For all their beauty and complexity, corals are fundamentally simple creatures. Each polyp, the individual animal that makes up a coral colony, has a body plan that has remained largely unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. It is a tube with a mouth at one end, surrounded by tentacles, and an internal cavity where digestion takes place. No brain, no heart, no complex organs, just a soft, delicate body built for one purpose, to capture food and survive. When a coral polyp feeds, it uses its tentacles to catch small organisms drifting in the water. Zooplankton, tiny crustaceans, fish larvae, and organic particles are all fair game. The tentacles are armed with stinging cells called cnidocytes, the same weapon jellyfish use. When prey touches a tentacle, the cnidocytes fire, injecting venom and tiny harpoons that paralyze or kill the victim. The tentacles then guide the prey toward the polyp's mouth, a small opening in the center of the ring of arms. The prey is pushed inside, into a space called the gastrovascular cavity. This cavity serves as both stomach and circulatory system, a multi-purpose chamber where digestion occurs. But here's where it gets interesting. Corals do not digest their prey entirely inside their bodies. Instead, they secrete digestive enzymes into the gastrovascular cavity, breaking down the prey into smaller particles. Some of this digestion happens externally, the enzymes breaking apart the prey before the nutrients are absorbed through the lining of the cavity. Once the nutrients are absorbed, the waste, anything that cannot be digested, is expelled back out through the mouth. Yes, the same opening that takes in food also expels waste. It is a simple, efficient system, one that many of the earliest animals on Earth used, and one that corals have never needed to improve upon. This simplicity is part of what makes corals so resilient. They do not require complex systems to survive. They do not need to hunt actively or move quickly. They simply wait, extend their tentacles, and let the ocean bring food to them. It is a passive, patient strategy, and it has worked for 500 million years. Despite their elegance, their vibrant colors, and the intricate structures they build, corals are, at their core, ancient and simple. They are survivors, shaped by time and refined by evolution into one of the most successful and enduring forms of life on Earth. And in that simplicity, there is a kind of beauty, a reminder that complexity is not always necessary, that sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that last. Some reefs are being 3D printed to aid restoration. In a world where technology and nature often seem at odds, where human innovation is frequently the cause of environmental harm, there is a new and hopeful development emerging. Scientists, engineers, and conservationists are turning to 3D printing, not to build machines or consumer goods, but to rebuild coral reefs. It sounds almost like science fiction, but it is real, and it is happening in oceans around the world. Using advanced 3D printing technology, researchers are creating artificial reef structures that mimic the complex, intricate shapes of natural coral. These structures are not meant to replace living coral, but to provide a foundation, a skeleton upon which coral larvae can settle and grow. The process begins with detailed scans of healthy coral formations. These scans capture every curve, every ridge, every tiny crevice. The data is then used to create digital models which are sent to large-scale 3D printers. These printers, often operating underwater or in coastal facilities, use eco-friendly materials like calcium carbonate or specially formulated concrete to build the structures layer by layer. The result is an artificial reef that looks and feels remarkably like the real thing. It has the same texture, the same geometry, the same nooks and crannies that coral larvae need to attach and grow. Once the structure is complete, it is transported to a degraded area of reef and carefully positioned on the seafloor. Within weeks, larvae begin to settle. Within months, tiny corals start to grow. Within years, the structure is covered in living coral and fish begin to return. The advantage of 3D printing is speed and precision. Traditional reef restoration methods involve hand-building structures or waiting for natural coral fragments to grow in nurseries. 3D printing can produce complex structures in a fraction of the time, and they can be tailored to specific environments. If a particular reef needs more surface area for fish to hide, the design can be adjusted. If another needs greater stability to withstand strong currents, the structure can be reinforced. It is a blend of nature and technology, a partnership between human ingenuity and the ocean's ancient rhythms. The printed structures do not replace the reef, they support it. They give it a head start, a helping hand. They accelerate what would take the reef centuries to rebuild on its own. Of course, 3D printing is not a silver bullet. It cannot address the root causes of reef decline, warming oceans, pollution, overfishing. But it is a tool, one more weapon in the fight to save the reefs. And in the hands of dedicated scientists and conservationists, it is making a difference. Piece by piece, structure by structure, the reef is being rebuilt, not by nature alone, but by nature working alongside the very species that nearly destroyed it. It is a story of redemption, of innovation in service of healing, of technology used not to exploit but to restore. And in the quiet depths where 3D printed structures now stand covered in growing coral, there is hope. Fragile, patient, but undeniably real.